Good morning. China has a monopoly on the manufacturing of drones and on the supply chains for drones. The reason is that China, before anyone else, began building drones for industry. That's where the market is. There will always be a lot more people who use drones for peaceful means compared to the population of people who want them for war. The industrial markets are also where cost and quality matter. The Pentagon is indifferent to cost. Money is no object. But that point of view is not prevalent in small businesses. Taking just a handful of examples here, how businesses are using drones in industry and even to create new industries. Here they're using drones to feed fish in offshore farms. In South Florida, there are a dozen companies that use drones to pressure wash roofs and buildings 400 feet high. That's 40 stories. These drones cost $6,000 to $15,000 each to buy from Chinese factories, so they're not cheap, but they replace a whole crew of guys dangling from cables off the sides of buildings. Cleanings can be done more often and obviously more safely. Empower Field is where the Denver Broncos play, so they're not hurting for money, but they use drones there. That is a completely new industry. It didn't exist even 5 years ago. Drones are heavily used now in construction and in mining. Mining companies are using drones to do surveying work and in blast management and in search and rescue of trapped miners. We know that drones are already in heavy use by hobbyists and videographers, but when affordable tools become available, industry and business people are clever in asking how they can be used in their own trades to do their jobs better and less expensively and safer. Chinese companies are way ahead of everyone else on drones because those are the markets that Chinese companies build for civilian users. Militaries across the world have learned the hard way that drones are also ruthlessly effective in warfare and at low cost. The Pentagon and other Western militaries are trying to catch up and to dominate in drones the same way they've done in the past and other transformative technologies. But the Chinese are already there in drones, and getting away from China won't happen fast, and it won't happen cheap. China has a strong hold on everything in this industry from end to end. This Ukrainian unit was taking apart a Russian FPV quadcopter. The batteries, the motors, and the brain came from China, and it could not have been built without Chinese parts. There's the money quote. China has already won World War III because everything is in its hands. That won't change soon, and it won't change later. Our group has done several reports on Chinese drones and the problems they're causing for other countries, and ironically, even for China itself. The Chinese have strict export bans on these technologies, restricting their use as weapons. And in the case of Russia and Ukraine, both sides are dependent on getting Chinese parts for their drones. The Pentagon has a $1 billion plan to break China's grip on the industry, called Drone Dominance. Unleashing American Drone Dominance was an executive order from last June, and the idea is to build drones that are completely domestic and not reliant on parts from foreign countries. A week later, the Secretary of War shared this on X, which became one of the worst ratio videos in the history of the internet. And this program is another example of political rhetoric which falls apart in the face of objective reality. There is no American drone dominance industry to unleash. It doesn't exist. China dominates the drone industry. Chinese companies build 90% of the world's drones, and even drone makers outside China source their parts from here for assembly elsewhere. Brushless motors. China controls at least 90% of the motors used in drones. Antennas. There are companies outside China who build them, but they cost a lot more. and Chinese-made antennas work smoothly with the other Chinese components. Next is the camera. There are Japanese and American companies that build sensory equipment, but the assembly of the whole camera is a Chinese industry. Precision lenses, those are also all China. Batteries for drones is the same as every other battery in the whole world. China owns the entire supply chain. We saved flight stacks for last because they show the problem even when non-Chinese alternatives are available. The technical barriers to entry are low, but US suppliers cannot compete on price because there is no demand, and therefore there is no reason to mass produce them. Drones are not complex machines, they're simple. Technically, anyone can build them. The China problem is the economies of scale on the manufacturing side and all the supply chains that feed their factories. China's cost advantages are total, may as well say. The Chinese build quadcopters for civilian users across the world. An American company using non-Chinese components cannot build one for under $15,000, over 3 times as much. China has a monopoly on batteries and motors. The batteries are made with minerals on the critical supply lists, and Chinese companies monopolize the supply chains for most of those. Getting new mines and then the infrastructure scaled up for mass production would take at least 10 years. So that's all the supply chain problem. Then there's the demand side. DJI is the largest producer in the world for commercial drones. And DJI and a handful of other Chinese companies have 80% market share in the United States. Chinese drones are high quality, high performance, and don't cost much. Nature photographers and YouTubers and other content producers are the ones most people think of first, but they're also big in real estate, civil engineering and surveying, inspection, search and rescue operations by first responders. So there we see again that there's a far bigger market for people using drones to save people instead of blowing them up. American drone companies cannot compete against DJI and Autel on price or quality. So the Pentagon is a godsend for American companies. Now they have a customer who doesn't care about cost and is probably indifferent as to the quality too. That's not true of municipal governments, usually anyway, and certainly not in industry. The military is the only client. The Pentagon promised to buy 340,000 first-person view drones over the course of several years. They hope that that order size is sufficiently large that the US supply chain will grow, competitors will come in, and the cost will fall. If that does happen, it will be the first time in the history of the universe that Pentagon contractors' prices fall over time. $2,300 is the cost for a high-quality drone right now from DJI. So the intended audience for that paragraph is someone who doesn't know, for example, that the Pentagon pays $90,000 for bolts and screws and fasteners that cost $100 at Home Depot. Then there's the problem of politics. It will take years for American companies to learn how to make the raw materials for these parts at all, let alone produce them at scale. And every presidential administration has an end date. There will be a new Secretary of War in January 2029 at the latest. And the drone program itself is only funded through next year, 2027. The War Department is trying to build an industry that already exists. The current industry is already high quality and low cost. So the only way forward is to get DJI and Chinese drone makers completely out of the way so US companies can compete. That came as relief to Skydio and to a handful of others. This is Blake Resnick, age 25, whose company builds drones for police departments. Brink knows they would have a lot more sales as soon as DJI drones are banned. he can sell a lot more drones to police departments who are happy with the DJI drones they're using now. And when the FCC did announce the ban, drone operators across the United States were furious. Immediately, they began stocking up on DJI drones and parts. These are American small business owners who will be put out of business because American drones cannot compete. They cost more, they don't work as well, and now that they're building for the Pentagon, there's no reason to make their products attractive to industrial or small business users. So companies are buying drones, batteries, and parts to push out the day that they'll be out of business. 43% of pilots, these are Americans, remember, say that the effect of the ban would be extremely negative and threatens their survival. 85% said they would last for 2 years or less. So there are no alternatives for these small business owners across the United States. Chinese companies are banned from selling new models in the American market, and the Pentagon is buying up drones for military and weapons testing. Thousands of those higher cost American drones are being bought for the US military by the Department of Government Efficiency. I'll just leave that alone. The jokes write themselves sometimes. The strategy there is to spur production of small attack drones and scale the US industrial base to build suicide drones. Again, there is no industrial market for that. There is no civilian business case for a one-way drone where a good day is launching a drone that costs thousands of dollars that doesn't come back. It's a new era of cheap and disposable drones. The only buyers in the world for disposable drones are militaries. And if it's the American military, they won't come cheap. They've announced an event fair where up to a dozen companies will be picked to supply 1,000 drones each for delivery in a few months. The risk to all that, of course, is that drone models from different companies will function differently, and users need to be trained to do that safely every time. They will be outfitted with explosives, after all. And another risk is the Pentagon will buy thousands of units that are obsolete by the time they get delivered to combat units. The War Department has a lot of problems then. The only way they can get a dozen American companies competing for contracts to build suicide drones is to deliberately bankrupt thousands of companies across the United States who use drones in their civilian businesses, and to tell hundreds of local governments and police and fire departments across the country that they cannot buy new drones to chase bad guys or put out fires. That is the cost, American population-wide, the cost of society. But even if the Pentagon can eventually buy drones at a low cost, the drones cannot be defended against at low cost. This was a real failure of imagination by Washington. We watched Russia and Ukraine use tens of thousands of low-cost drones to attack each other and destroy armored vehicles that are 100 times more costly than the drone itself. But for some reason, nobody thought that Iran might be watching all that too. Iran blew up American naval bases and radars that cost hundreds of millions of dollars each. When Iran says that no ships are going through the Hormuz without their green light first, it's with the implication that one of those drones, costing a few $1,000s, could be launched at a ship costing a few $100 million, with another few $100 million worth of crude oil in the tanks. Nobody is even close to solving that problem yet. In the first 4 days of the war in Iran, the Pentagon launched $5.7 billion worth of interceptors to shoot down those very low-cost Iranian ballistics and drones, just in the first 4 days. One Patriot missile costs millions of dollars each and takes years to build, while drones are mass-produced and cost 1,000 times less. The good news, such as it is that some companies are hoping to build interceptor missiles that only cost tens of thousands of dollars each instead of hundreds of thousands. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency might see that as a win, but we just moved the decimal point over one spot. An Iranian drone costs a few $1,000s. And so these new interceptors, which have not yet been built or tested, will hopefully cost just 10 to 20 times that. Plus, remember that usually 2 or more interceptors are fired against a single inbound. So we're back to the same problem as before. Iran, in the case today, wins these engagements no matter what happens. If their drone is intercepted, it's at the cost of 20 times what Iran paid to launch their drone. If the drone is not intercepted, it may go on to blow up a headquarters building, or a radar system, or a supertanker. That's the real lesson, and that's the real problem posed by drones overall. They cannot be stopped. Iran proved it. The Pentagon's budget is $1 trillion. Iran's military spending for the past year was 1/50th of that, $23 billion. Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons or aircraft carriers or stealth bombers. Those things aren't important anymore. That's the quote from the very beginning. Iran is a BRICS country. Iran is friendly with China, and Iran has a lot of drones. And that is all that matters, because drones cannot be stopped. And that could be very good news. Instead of transforming warfare, drones may just end it completely. This is Harbin. Be good.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.